morning, everyone. How's everybody doing today? Oh, fantastic. Well, I hope you're doing well at home, safe and sound, and dodging this virus we've got here. So today I'm going to talk to you about industrial hemp IPM update for Arizona. Again, I'm an agricultural extension agent in Yuma, a generalist amongst many specialists here. So one of the projects I'm working on is hemp. So today we're going to talk about a few different things. I'm going to provide you with a really quick Arizona hemp update, kind of where we are legally and what's planted around the state. Then we're going to talk a little bit about this variety trial that I'm running and some of the interesting research opportunities it's providing. Then we're going to talk about some of the insects that I've observed and some of my colleagues have observed, as well as some pathogens. And then we're going to talk about what are our options for using pesticides on hemp. And the TLDR is we have many options available to us. So first thing I'm going to do is tell you a little bit about where we are for a hemp update for the state. So these are the results from 2019. The AZDA with Brian McGrew's group produced a really nice end of year summary. So last year we planted about 5.5 thousand acres. 3.8 of that was inspected, which means if you read between the lines on that, about 1,500 acres, 28% didn't even make it to harvest. So we had a lot of troubles even just getting to the finish line. Once we got to the finish line, of course, all of it had to be sampled, and if any of it was too high in THC, if it was above the 0.3 level for THC, just Delta 9 is what they tested in 2019, then it had to be remediated or destroyed. And so we had 20% of all the hemp that made it to the end had to be destroyed. It could not be harvested. So that's a big hit for the grower. And kind of a really nice bullet point that they add here is how bad was it? How hot was this hemp? Well, the legal limit is 0.3%, and on average, we're looking at 0.44%. So we're right over the legal limit, which is a big bone of contention for all hemp growers, not just in Arizona, but across the nation, pushing a big movement to try to get that moved up to the 1% level, which is a big fight, but a lot of people are trying to make it because of this very reason. Okay, where are we now? So Brian sent me an email 2 days ago telling me some of the changes that have happened. First of all, we are adopting the federal guidelines for testing for hemp. It was in the past, last year, we just tested for Delta 9 THC, which is the psychoactive component. We didn't take THCA, which is a precursor for Delta 9, into the equation because it's non-psychoactive. But if you apply heat to THCA, there's a carboxylation reaction that occurs that changes it to Delta 9 at the rate of 0.877 units for every units of THCA for every unit of Delta 9. So the federal standard does take that into account, and we are adopting that. What does that mean for our grower? It's going to be even more difficult to hit our 0.3% limit, because all the samples that I run don't have any Delta 9. They all just have the THCA because it hasn't been heated. And they would have been fine under last year's law, but under this year's law, they're completely out of compliance. In addition to that, you have to notify the state 15 days before harvest. Instead of some states had 30 days. So you really have to be on point for when you call in your inspection and for when you want to harvest. So what are we looking at across the state? Well, we've had a great reduction in the amount of acreage that has been planted. Instead of that 5.5 thousand, now that was for the full year, we only have 636 acres that have been planted statewide to this date. Now with this fact, you would expect there'd be a slowdown in sampling, but there's not. They're sampling the same amount that they were last year. What does that mean? That means that growers aren't growing as many acres, but they're diversifying in the varieties that they're growing, because each variety needs to be sampled individually. And they're subdividing their land into blocks. So if one part of the field goes hot, they don't have to harvest it, but they'll still have another block that may be right on the borderline for passing THC compliance. And then what's really nice to see is that our growers are getting smarter on when they're calling the state agency, and our state agency is getting much better about coming out in time to sample and run through the lab to give people their decisions. And that's resulted in a far lower number of THC positive hits than we're seeing before. Lots of people are coming in compliance. Only 0.08% are out of compliance, which is a fantastic thing to see. So what's the forecast for the rest of the year? What's it looking like? Well, last year, September and October were big planting dates in the state for hemp. So we may see a big increase above this 636 acres that we currently have. But I mean, realistically, we probably won't see that 5.5 thousand that we saw last time. Will that remain the same? You know, we'll see, but looking in the crystal ball, probably not. We'll probably have this continued reduced acreage with increased varieties grown on that acreage. And then this also begs the question, will the fall harvest be hotter, higher in THC than the spring harvest and the winter harvest, really? We're noticing that there may be some heat units involved with increased cannabinoid levels. This is kind of, you know, just what we're seeing. We can't really confirm it. Many people are saying different things, but we're starting to see that, and maybe in the winter months, there are less cannabinoids content than in the warmer seasons, like a spring harvest might have. So that remains to be seen, and more data will be collected to prove whether that theory is accurate or not. So that's where we are in the state. We at the University of Arizona, we're running a hemp variety trial where we have participation from 7 different seed companies, which have sent us 17 different varieties of seed. We're growing that in a 4 replicated trial at 2 locations in Yuma, on the Mesa farm where they have sandy soil, and then our Valley farm where we have that heavy soil traditionally used in vegetable production. We planted in early April, and really I could spend, you know, an hour talking just about this trial, but really that's kind of off topic. So I'm just gonna provide you with a quick overview. So this is kind of what we're seeing with the crop. It really pops out of the soil really quickly. 13 days after planting, we're seeing emergence. 22 days after planting, we're seeing, you know, second true leaf growth, and then 30, look at that. It's just booming. So this plant really grows fast. Here's an autoflower variety that's ready for harvest. This is only maybe about 1.5 feet tall, which is kind of expected for autoflower. And we're harvesting it, we're drying it, we're getting stem weight, we're getting flower weight, and of course, cannabinoid content. Where are we now? We're in the time of year where the photoperiodic or the full season types are flowering, and they're putting on some weight. We're going out every week and recording flowering of every plant that's in the field, so we can kind of understand how different varieties are maturing in our lower day length environment down here at these southern latitudes than what's traditionally grown in Colorado Oregon, and Washington State. So these are a couple of the interns that are working on the project, Victor and Chris. We're doing our best social distance in the field as we collect the data that we need to move this forward. So what are just some things that we've learned from this? Well, finding the right variety for the right location and season is essential. Some of the varieties that I'm growing are from Oregon. They've gotten a foot tall, and these are the full season, these are the photoperiodic. They've gotten a foot tall, they've stopped growing, and they've since died in the heat because they don't have the rooting system to support the type of heat stress that we're seeing here. Now, hold on a second. While other varieties are 6 foot tall and doing great in our heat. Most seed varieties that we have, that we're seeing in the field, have a lot of genetic variation. And to make a long story short, we're talking hybrids crossed with hybrids to create new hybrids in a traditionally clonally propagated crop. So seeding for a lot of these companies is new. So really they're approaching this almost as you would a landrace variety, where there's lots of genetic variation within a specific variety. So there's a lot that needs to be worked out there. It's also essential to learn your CBD to THC ratios. That is really important. I'm finding that these numbers are really highly correlated to each other. The CBD and THC ratios that are produced, they're like 94% correlated. So as the CBD levels go up, the THC levels go up as well. So if you're looking at like a 15-to-1 ratio, you may have to harvest when your crop is at 4% CBD to stay legally compliant on the 0.3% THC results. Versus, let's say, a variety that would be a 30-to-1 CBD to THC ratio, that you'd be able to harvest a max of 9% CBD. So to stay in compliance, which is another reason that people are trying to push for that 1% limit instead of 0.3. To grow this crop successfully, you need to test cannabinoids early and often. You need to be testing, sending samples away to a lab every other day when you're coming close to harvest. And also, you're going to decide to pull the trigger for harvest based on your test results, not your physiological maturity. And a lot of times you will be harvesting before the crop is ready to be harvested just to stay legal. How do you test it? Well, typically they do, this is a cannabinoid testing setup here with one machine that we've purchased here in Yuma Extension. So basically it's a methanol extract where you grind your dry plant material and extract it with methanol and then put it through kind of a chromatography machine where it'll tell you the different cannabinoid levels that are here. Also, with this machine, you can test concentrates. So the CBD oils and distillates and the processed material can be tested through this machine as well. And I just want to mention as a side note here, as a service to the community, this machine it doesn't belong to me, it belongs to the community of Yuma. If you're a hemp grower in Yuma, this machine is here for you to help you decide when to pull the trigger to call the state. So bring your samples to my lab, or I will come to your field, and we will make sure that you are staying within compliance to the best of our ability. So going on to the next part of this lecture, we're going to talk about hemp pests. So this is kind of a collaborative effort between several researchers here at the U of A. Dr. John Palumbo, who's our entomologist here, has been researching the different types of pests that are attracted to hemp, that are feeding on hemp, so we can try to understand things like economic impact and when we should decide to pull the trigger on doing a pesticide spray or not. And then Dr. Alex Hu, who's also a researcher with the U of A, plant pathologist, is doing a lot of work with me to help identify some of the pathogens that I'm experiencing in my trial, which is a little foreshadowing for the slides to come. So Dr. Palumbo has seen white flies on hemp, both adults and nymphs. He's seen flea beetle damage. I've seen this as well. You know, that flea beetle, it's kind of hanging out on the purslane and the goosefoot, and then it's jumping on to the hemp to taste it, but then it's jumping back to the purslane for safety when you come by and scare them. So really they're going with what they know, but they're trying out hemp. And I'm sure, you know, in a year or two, they're just going to be all over this hemp and without needing the purslane or the goosefoot for safety as they adapt to the new crop. And they're doing a lot of damage too. So, you know, does that have economic impact? I'm sure. Left to their own devices, yes, I'm sure they will. Spiders and webbing. If you've walked through a cotton field in August, you've seen plenty of spider webs, and you know, you probably thank the spiders for being there to help control your pests. But in hemp, depending upon why you're growing the crop, they could be a nuisance. If you are creating smokable flower, there's no way you can sell this. Your buyer will not buy this. This is damaged goods. So you're gonna have to sell this as an destined for the extraction market to be turned into crude oil, distillate, or isolate. But spiders love this hemp. They're all over it. And also, this is confused with spider mites, which I'm told is also a problem, but I haven't personally seen it. And then russet mites too are also a big problem in other parts of the state and other people's grows that I've been talking to. Beet armyworm seems to enjoy this crop. We've both, Dr. Palumbo and I have seen it nibbling on the hemp. It's kind of wanting to do, you know, what it normally does and go in deep, but it can't. But it's definitely making some economic damage there in the crop. We're also seeing some corn earworm, and you can see here there's some big time damage. And that's unable to be sold as smokable flour, as damaged goods. And then when it attacks early, you see on the right, when it attacks early, then as it develops, it kind of develops this necrosis spot, which, you know, further degrades the quality of the crop. So our last insect that I will talk about today is the beet leafhopper. This is a pest known to be here in Yuma, and it has been well documented to be a vector for a virus called the beet curly top virus. And this is a transition in the slideshow from the insects to the pathogens, because we're starting to see a lot of that, at least in my trials here. And the more growers I talk to and showing the pictures of this, they're saying they're affected by this as well. There's a very good document that's produced by Colorado State University on this subject of beet curly top virus in hemp. I strongly recommend, if you're a hemp grower, to just Google beet curly top virus Colorado, and you'll pull that publication right up and basically see everything that I'm seeing down here. And Alex Hu as well is seeing. So on the left, we have a beautiful looking hemp plant. You know, it's just as tall as the sweet corn planted next to it. On the right, we're seeing a beet curly top affected plant. At first, I thought this was a micronutrient deficiency, and we went ahead and sprayed micros on it, but it didn't alleviate the situation. So I called Alex down from Tucson, and he more than happily came down to our field. We walked it together, took some samples, ran it through his lab, and it popped positive for that beet curly top. Interestingly enough, it's a different strain than what Colorado's seeing. So yay for us, I guess. I mean, it's never a good sign when you excite a plant pathologist. Um, that's bad news for the grower. So this is what a foliar symptom looks like. It's got that kind of mosaic modeling, that green blotchy, I would call it blotchy, but it almost looks like a watercolor mark on the leaf. You'll see that on the lower leaves. And then you'll start to see this pale chlorotic looking leaves on top, which with some of that witch brooming, that dwarfing of the growth of the leaves on top. Interestingly enough, sometimes the whole plant isn't affected. Sometimes it's just a part of it. Like in this case, just the center is affected, and then the side shoots are perfectly fine. Also giving you a hint that this probably isn't a micronutrient deficiency. In addition to that chlorosis, sometimes you'll see this twisting of leaves. This was very commonly seen in my trial. And then here's a close-up look of that witch brooming. So these are some photos that Alex took at his lab to further kind of demonstrate to you what you might see. And these are all popping positive for this bee curly top virus. In addition to that, we saw Pythium. So we're seeing a lot of vascular collapse and Pythium root rot. This is a sample of root that I shipped to Alex in the middle, and just sitting in the bag in shipment in our warm winter months, it produced all this mycelium, which he then cultured and confirmed that we're seeing Pythium root rot down here. Especially, I'm seeing it in both trials, but primarily my trial on the heavy soils in the valley, it's more prevalent than the trial on the Mesa sand that has lighter sandy soil. It's less prevalent there, but it's still occurring there as well. So it's all over the place. What does it look like? Well, sudden vascular collapse. It's kind of, and speaking of collapsing, this makes me want to collapse because my beautiful trial is really fading away. It's turning from a variety trial into a pathogen trial. As you know, one day I walk out to the field, looks fine. The next day, just sudden death. So here's an example of a cross section of a healthy stem versus an infected stem. You can see that browning, that clogging of the vascular tissue, which then stops the water from going up, and basically the plant just collapses. I'm getting all choked up talking about it. Here's an advanced stem. So how bad is it? Well, really bad. And so this is a chart showing mortality of my variety trial that I've got. Each line in this is a different variety. So some varieties appear to be more affected than others. Look at that one variety, we're seeing 85% mortality. At the lowest, we're seeing, you know, about 32% mortality. So how significant is this? Extremely significant. If you're a grower, you know, I want you to really think about, you know, I want you to think about this and think about the window, finding the right window. Is a spring planting window the right window for us? Question mark, I can't answer that. It may be just like melons, where you plant in the spring, you're fine. Plant it in the fall, we got your CS DYV problems. So what are some options available to us? Well, first of all, I want to discuss why this is so controversial when it comes to hemp. A lot of it, there's a federal gray area because the legality of this federally isn't where it is statewide. So states have been kind of left to their own devices for many years. And the federal agencies are kind of playing catch up, slowly approving labeled pesticides for use for labeling. There was also a big fiasco when it came to the myclobutanol fungicide. They found out the hard way that when you ignite it, it creates hydrogen cyanide gas. So that's something that they didn't test, or because it's not labeled for hemp, because there wasn't a system for that. And for cannabis, people found out the hard way that that there was problems there. So that had a lot of backlash in the cannabis community, which really made them want to focus on getting the right pesticides for hemp. Also, consumer demand wants pesticide free. Nobody wants to put pesticides in their body, especially, you know, with the system we have for approving them now being so evolving so much and changing every day. So they'd rather just have nothing on it. What does that result in? Well, I called it a cannabis extractor yesterday. I talked with John Courier at Imperial CBD Extraction over in El Centro, and he says every batch that goes through his processing facility, when it's extracted into crude, distillate, or isolate, they test for heavy metals, pesticide residue, and residual solvents. So are they testing for this? Yes. So if you spray the furrows, you better be careful not to get any of it on the plant. Let me backtrack that. Don't spray the furrows, all right? Because if you get any into the plant, they're gonna test for this, okay? And if it pops positive, you may have a hard time finding anybody to buy it. And buyers are demanding this even though it's not legally required. So really quickly, I have just a few slides left to talk about what they're testing for, and then what are some options available to you. They're testing for everything. Imidacloprid, pyrethrins, of course the myclobutanol they're testing for. So if you're spraying any of these chemicals, they will test for it in a lab, and if it pops positive, you're devaluing your crop, maybe even making it so nobody will want to buy it. So be careful. Okay, what is available to us? We do have things that are available to us. In Arizona, we have adopted Colorado's extensive approved pesticide list. Now, when you're looking at that list, you need to verify that the product listed on that for Colorado, acceptable for use in Colorado, is also acceptable for use in Arizona too. So that's an extra step we need to take, but we have a strong library of pesticides that are available to us to use. Okay, so looking at the legalese of Colorado, how did they decide what to use, especially when there was no, at the time when this started, there was no ability to even list hemp or cannabis on a label. Well, they jumped through a lot of hoops to figure out what they could do. So they had to say that all active ingredients of the pesticides product are exempt from the requirements of a tolerance. What does that mean? Tolerance means that it has residue on it that would hurt people. So it's got to be free of that. It has to be used on, the product has to be listed for human consumption, okay for human consumption. And then the active ingredient must be acceptable for use on tobacco, because things change, chemicals change when they're heated, right? When they're combusted. So those are the general guidelines that Colorado is using. So if you Google Colorado approved pesticide list for cannabis, it's better than putting a link that you can't click on right here. You'll find a 74-page document listing the approved pesticides for this region. And it's very extensive. Something you're gonna wanna look here, I just called Dr. Laura Quackenbush, who runs this program, and just confirmed it. Really, you want to look here at commercial, whether it's approved for commercial use or approved for personal use. Many of these are approved for home use, but they're not approved for commercial use. And if it's a no for commercial, it's going to be a no for hemp too. And they're talking about eliminating the hemp because at the time that they made this, hemp wasn't even approved for commercial production. So really it's kind of a redundant thing. So what are some examples? In the pesticide category, these are all the different types of pesticides that you'll find, which is basically everything you would need, from bactericide to herbicide to IGR, lots of options. What are some insecticides that are approved? Well, certain neem oils, others are not, but there's a select few that are approved. Azadirachtin, which is kind of a neem derivative. Some pyrethrins are approved. You have insecticidal soap, some soybean mineral oil, a lot of plant concentrates like geranium oil, mint oil, cinnamon oil, those kinds of blends. BT, thank goodness, is approved. Diatomaceous earth approved. Iceria fumosorosiae, which is an entomopathogenic fungi. So it's a fungus that will inoculate itself onto an insect and then cause the insect to die. That's approved. And then some newer things like the Helicobacter zea nucleopolyhedrovirus, which is kind of a biocontrol. So new type of technologies are coming out that are approved for this, that are not harmful to people. And there are lists of herbicides as well. Here's just some examples of what we'll see. Ammonium nonanoate. I have no idea what that is. And other plant concentrates, a lot of ammoniated soap of fatty acids, capric acid, caprylic acid, acetic acid, which is just vinegar, and eugenol. So there are options available for herbicides as well. Perfect. So that concludes my talk. I think I went a little bit over in time, but special thanks I want to give to all of our sponsors for the variety trial. If they didn't give their generous support to sending seed my way and money to run the trial, we would never have this information available to us. And also the staff at the agricultural research stations that are making all this possible. Bert, Jesus, and Tony, big thank you to you. And then of course, the pesticide cooperators at the U of A, Dr. John Palumbo and Dr. Alex Hu. Thank you for your help with this as well. Working together, we can help to try to conquer this big dragon that we have of hemp, to make sure that our growers are producing products that will generate them profit and help out the nation with their desire for the healing properties of CBD. Okay, thank you.
Great, Robert. Thank you very much for your participation. That was a great variety trial update for us. And pathogens, your insect pressure, this is great. You just answered one question from somebody texted that what is available in the Colorado approved chemical for hemp? Is it insecticides, antimicrobials, fungicides? They're all listed, right? There's many listing for that, correct?
Yes, all of those are available. All options are available.
Thank you very much.
I have a quick question for Robert.
Sure, go ahead.
Hi, Robert. This is Bindu.
Hi,
I have
Bindu.
a question about the beet curly top virus. So when you and Alex tested for the virus, did you guys test for other ranges of virus that have been detected in hemp or not? Or did you guys just do the BCTV?
I would have to talk with him about what he's tested for. I'm not quite sure the other things that he's tested for.
The reason I am asking is because in hemp or in any plants, when you have viruses, it's usually more than one. So it could be that you guys detected BCTV in those samples, but that doesn't mean that it is the sole causal agent. Unless you do a pathogenicity test. Do you know if you guys did any pathogenicity test to prove that that was the causal agent? Did you transfer it to healthy plant using plant hoppers or mechanical inoculation to reproduce the symptoms?
Can you repeat the last part of what you said?
Did you do the pathogenicity test to prove that that the virus was the causal agent for that particular symptoms that you saw in the field?
So the specific details of the pathogen analysis were done by Alex. So I think, you know, you and I can take this offline and we can talk with Alex and kind of put our heads together and see what was done and then what needs to be done to produce the information needed.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you guys. We really appreciate it.